Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm talking about the full moon in Capricorn on the 13th of July. But of course, I'm looking at that all-important setting, the context in which that full moon is placed, which is really all important. And on this occasion, interestingly enough, this full moon is a supermoon, so you'll be able to see it looming large above the horizon. Now, I'm not sure whether, because it's a supermoon, its effects are supersized. But in a funny kind of way, you might think that if the moon affects the tides, the pull of the tides, and of course we have emotional tides, perhaps because it's a little bit closer, we might feel more extremes of emotions, whether those emotions are super happy or super not so happy. But there are other reasons, which I'll come to shortly, as to why this full moon is particularly powerful. And it's certainly happening at a very important period of the year. And one of the things I think about this full moon, and there's usually a full moon either in late June or during the course of July in Capricorn, and it relates to the new moon, which usually happens around the new year. So we need to flip back and think about the 12th of January when the new moon in Capricorn took place, because of course that comes at a time when we're all kind of fired with kind of ambition and hope. We've got all sorts of plans for the year ahead, and what we want to do during the course of this coming year. So of course around this time, when we get to that full moon in Capricorn halfway through the year, we're at kind of an assessment point. Well, have we actually fulfilled any of our affirmations? Did any of them work? And where are we with our plans for the year? So it's a time of assessment just generally for all of us. But of course, I'm going to be taking you through it sign by sign a little bit later on. So what I'm going to do is take us straight to the horoscope of this full moon so that we can see the various things that are happening in and around the time of that full moon. So as we can see here, I've set this full moon, the time of the full moon, which of course is at 1837 UTC, so that you can adjust that according to where you are in the world. I've set this for Lisbon in Portugal, so any of you who are watching this video will know that this is exactly what was happening in your small universe as the full moon was exact. And we can see the full moon, the sun on the opposite side of the zodiac to the moon, which is just approaching the horizon line, which is the rising part. The rising sign is, what's coming up over the horizon at the time of birth. So we can see that the moon is just above the sign or the glyph for the planet Pluto. And if we flip over to the other side of our horoscope, we can see the symbol for the sun and next to it, Mercury. So we know that at that particular time, it isn't just a full moon, but both Mercury and the sun are applying or getting nearer to an opposition to Pluto. And that's one of the reasons this is a very, very powerful full moon, and why I'm going to be taking rather a closer look at this planet in a little while. The other thing that I want you to look at here, just under the symbol for Mercury, it's sort of sitting on the horizon line. It's got a circle and a cross in it. That's what we call the part of fortune, one of the Arabian parts. And that is just a degree which is made up of a combination of the sun and the moon and the ascendant. I don't want to put any more detail into that, otherwise I'll confuse some of you. But it's supposed to be here. This is the part of fortune. So we think of it as a part or an area in which we might find joy in life, and we might experience a sense of wholeness and fulfillment. But in terms of being a planetary symbol, it is not. So we don't want to get tied up with what that full moon is doing anywhere near the part of fortune. Let's get involved in that. Now, the other thing that you're probably not seeing just immediately, but we're looking at the symbol for Venus, which is in the sort of 4 o'clock position of our horoscope. And if we look at the degree there, we can see it's 24 degrees of Gemini. And if we then look around, see what else we can find around that degree, we'll see Neptune there at about 25 of Pisces. So we know there's a relationship between Venus and Neptune. And there's a 90-degree square. So these planets are what we call in an angle of tension, but actually, you know, when we put Venus with Neptune, we can get some very, very romantic and really divine kind of things occurring at this time. So any of you that are expecting to be going to weddings, or you're in the early stages of a romantic relationship, then this full moon and that Venus-Neptune square, they're going to make it super romantic. It's going to be a time when you might feel that not exactly that all your Christmases have come at once, but it will be, you'll be flooded with kind of romantic feelings. Of course, we have to say as well, if we look at Venus, especially if we align this planet to things to do with money and the economy, and we put that together with Neptune, we can see that this might also be a little bit of a problem time for economies the world over, if only because, you know, we've got a situation with all these, you know, rising inflation and interest rates and gas prices. And Neptune actually is another figure that we associate really with gas and with oil and sea, undersea gas, you know, that kind of thing. So maybe at this particular time, there are all sorts of things that are relevant and perhaps not in a good way that are related to that Venus-Neptune square. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you, and if we go through, you know, what's happening around this time, we've got the new moon on the 13th of July, and what will happen as we, well, only 9 hours further on, the moon will be conjoined to Pluto. So that's why we're saying this full moon is, you know, is connected to Pluto. And some days later, we're looking at the 18th of July, we're looking about the 20th of July, we've got Mercury and then the Sun also opposing Pluto, and that's going to be a large part of what I'm going to be talking to you about. On the 18th, Venus moves into Cancer, so that's very, very good news for all Cancerians, and actually for Capricorns and for Arians and Librans as well, because it has a much more dynamic resonance with those areas of the horoscope than it does perhaps with other signs. And at Venus, the principle of joy, of abundance, of love, of success. It's a good planet, Venus, one way or the other. So when you have Venus connected to something in your chart, there's usually some nice things going on at that particular time. Other important things, we've got Mercury in Leo. That's going to happen on the 19th. So I always say when Mercury comes into your sign, and in this case Leo, you've got the power of speech. Suddenly you can begin to make a lot more sense of things, and you can start to acquire clarity. Now, also, last but not least, we've got the Sun entering Leo on the 22nd, and I'll probably be talking a little bit more about that when we get to my next video. But suffice to say, Leo, while the Sun is in the 12th house, there's a lot of preparation going on, and there's a lot of things that perhaps aren't very clear. So hopefully Mercury's arrival in your sign and then the Sun are going to give you the energy and the clarity with which to deal with a lot of things in your life that are currently kind of confusing. I also want us to look at the planet Mars, and that's in about the 5 o'clock position on our clock face horoscope. And as we look at it, this is 5 degrees of Taurus, 56. But the important thing I want to talk about here is that on August the 1st, Mars will catch up to the planet Uranus, which is it's close to in that horoscopic circle, and all sorts of fireworks are going to be happening at that time. So the late July getting into early August is going to be electric. Again, that's something I'm going to be talking about in a little bit more detail on my next video. But, it's always worth paying attention to this, because not only do we have a full moon and all these influences to Pluto, which is saying, let's confront things. I'm a great one for confrontation, not in the sense of having an argy-bargy conflict and upset, but actually really facing something and dealing with it. And I think this mid-period of July is a good time to really deal with things we're very, very uncomfortable about, because, we can do this in advance so that we don't get kind of caught out by that Mars-Uranus conjunction tail end of July and into early August, which is really, really going to be a very, very unstable patch. Okay, so let me come back to me again. We don't really need to look at that horoscope circle anymore, because what I want to really look at now is Pluto. Now, I do put these astrological labels onto my astrology, whether I'm writing my horoscopes or I'm doing audios, or in this case, a video, because I like us to know that we're really dealing with something tangible. A lot of the time, if you're not really discussing what you're looking at, it can seem as though somebody like myself is speaking from some kind of perspective where we're kind of all powerful and we just know these things. But we understand, we astrologers who've trained in our subject have learned about the process of this planet. We're familiar with it. We know about it, which is why we can hand on our wisdom when we've got a particularly powerful Plutonic period, which of course we do at this particular time of 2022. Now, Pluto, of course, is not considered to be a planet. It was a planet, but then in 2006, a whole body of astronomical wisdom decided by a vote that Pluto was no longer a planet, didn't fulfill 3 essential requirements of planets, and therefore it was demoted to a dwarf planet. But of course, it's still in our solar system, it's still going around the sun. And of course, we astrologers have been working with Pluto, watching it in terms of what does this mean? What are the events that are happening at this time? How does it work in this person's chart, in that person's chart? We've been doing this for over 100 years. Well, no, maybe not, almost 100 years. And that means we've got a great body of knowledge as to how this planet works in astrology on an individual level and on a collective level. Now, one of the things about how we determine what planets mean and how they work, well, of course, the planets up until the discovery of Uranus in 1781, they were seeable with the naked eye. We could see right the way up to Saturn, as we can too. We can see Saturn at a particular time of the year when it's when we're able to see it, and we can certainly see it with the aid of a telescope. And that's all the ancient world knew about. Saturn was the limit. So when Uranus came up, suddenly there was this new planet. It changed everything, and that's why we consider Uranus to be such a change bringer. He literally opened everybody's eyes, certainly astronomers and scientists' eyes, to a whole new world beyond Saturn. So at the time what we call the outer planets are discovered, the events that are going on at the time give a lot of color to our interpretation. So what was happening in 1930 when Pluto was discovered, we had the rise of depth psychology. There was also the rise of fascism. We think of that period in the early 30s before World War II and all the things that were going on with extremes, extreme right. And so we associate Pluto with extremes, period. But when we think about the rise of a dark power, that's very much allied to the meaning of Pluto. Also, the atom bomb being developed at this time is also very Plutonic. When we split the atom, we created from something absolutely minuscule, infinitesimally small, huge and extraordinary power. And that again tells us a lot about how Pluto works. And a very simple way of looking at it is that Pluto makes small things bigger, and we are able to see things at a great distance, like we do with a great telescope. We can see things that are far away, out of our vision, we can see, and that's a Plutonic thing as well. Now, the other thing that really I suppose that I need to get at with Pluto is, and that relates to all the other planets, why they were given those names and why we associate them with certain factors, life factors and personality traits. The mythology comes into all of this as well. You know, Mars is the Roman god of war, Venus is the Roman goddess of love, and so by the time we get to Pluto, we're looking at the god of the underworld. And Pluto is a very interesting figure because we are frightened of the underworld, because that's where we go when we die. And well, in mythology, it was the souls of the dead, you know, were transported to Pluto's realm. So it is a little fearful. We don't know what's in store in that dark underworld. But there were two halves to Pluto's kingdom. There was Tartarus, where there were a very unhappy state of affairs for the souls who had taken there, whereas the Elysian fields was where there was so much joy and sweetness and light. And so we have these opposites, these extremes in Pluto's realm. And the other thing that's very important about this planet, which helps us understand how it works in our lives, is that Pluto had this helmet which rendered him invisible. So he could go about his works without anyone seeing him. And that is a direct relation to what happens to us with Pluto transits, is we don't see them coming. We have no idea why this situation unfolded and happened. So it's been going on for a long while in the underworld, out of our range, and suddenly now it's here. And we're often, you know, wiped away by it. It's blown away by what happens with Pluto. And it does have, I think, certainly all the outer planets, when we're looking at them in reference to what's going on in our lives and our charts and the world, is that they bring a great sense of fate with them. It's because we feel the events that they chime with are things that we haven't actually chosen, or we didn't, you know, try to bring them about. They just happened. And that's particularly so with Pluto. So when we look at Pluto in a natal chart and we think about its principles, and we can understand that from some very simple keywords, we think about Pluto and transformation. Pluto changes what was one thing into something else. And we think about the process of transformation, which is a bit like the caterpillar to the chrysalis to the butterfly, is that with Pluto, we are emerging ultimately as that butterfly, or we do it like an onion skin or a snake skin, the snake shedding its skin and then emerging as this beautiful, shiny, new creature. We don't know how uncomfortable it is to shed a skin, do we? We certainly know it's uncomfortable in terms of psychology and in terms of our life. When we have to get rid of something and shed something, it's painful. So maybe this is also for the snake as it scratches away at that old skin before it emerges as this new shiny object, might be a painful process. So we need to think about that in terms of Pluto. But when we see Pluto in a horoscope, it just is its principles of transformation, of elimination, of death and rebirth, which is just another way of transformation. It doesn't mean very much on its own. the house that it's in, oh yes, the area of the horoscope that Pluto is governing, if you like, or related to, that's going to speak volumes, because that area of life is under Pluto's rule. And so we know a lot of transformation is going to go on in that area of life. But the only way we get to really understand how Pluto works in our life otherwise is the connections or the aspects that Pluto makes to the personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, ascendant. Then we pull in that Pluto experience. And it's the same in transit. Pluto, in terms of where it is in the sky, so to speak, how it is moving around your horoscope and the horoscopes of our leaders and of countries, then when we get Pluto in a certain part, whether it's on a radical planet, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, or whether it's on an ascendant or a midheaven, we certainly know that the country or you are going through a period of huge transformation, which can certainly take 2 years to go through, because Pluto is such a slow-moving planet. It stays over 3 or 4 degrees for a 2 to, well, even in 4 years, a 4-year period, we're still working with that kind of Pluto resonance. And so there are often a lot of incidents in our lives that happen on a Pluto transit that contribute to this great sense of core changes in our lives out there, our external lives, and of course, core changes in terms of who we are as people, core psychological changes. Now, it's never going to be easy. Sometimes, you know, you look at the charts of famous people and you see Pluto coming to their ascendant or to their midheaven, and that's when they achieved great success. You know, the world got to know about them. But, you know, it's a poison chalice, because what happens when you become extremely famous or everyone recognizes you, you lose your privacy, and it's open season. You know, newspapers, whatever, you know, can say anything about you. There's always a poison chalice with Pluto when you've got a fabulous experience with this planet, and we should never forget that. And at the same time, the really difficult experiences we get with Pluto, we lose someone we love, our jobs go, we've lost money, all the things that render us kind of helpless, in the dark, as it were. Out of that comes great things. And so we need always to remember that process of extremes that goes on with Pluto, and how the purpose is always to show us and to, you know, change us in terms of who we need to be, who we can be, and ultimately where our destiny is taking us. So I think it's good to understand that about Pluto, because as we come into this period around the full moon, there is going to be a lot of undercover stuff coming to light. You know, when we think about Pluto in the underworld, it's hidden, it's dark. We can't get there unless we're dead, you know, or unless, you know, we are completely not in the real world, so to speak. And what we encounter there can be alarming and frightening. So we get that similar process going on in our lives, generally, with things kind of popping out at us that we think, wow, what did that happen? What was that? And also in the world at large, we see, you know, all sorts of things happen, major leadership crises. We've got things going on in different parts of the world where there's terrible conflict and scandal, and you know, things being really, really so in need of change, but it's been brought about by exceptionally challenging circumstances. But that's just a general theme. And of course, as I said, as this full moon, as we saw, was close to Pluto, we could really say that at the time of this full moon, a lot of things are going to emerge into the light. So that means generally in terms of the world at large and in terms of our own life too. And I always like to use the word confrontation when I talk about Pluto, because confrontation, I think, first and foremost, means really confronting something, looking at it and saying, this is it, this is what we have. And so that full moon is all about really facing something. But it can also be about confrontation, in that there are upsets and conflicts. It works in all those different kind of different tiers of meaning, if you like. So let me go now through each sign and give you a kind of taste of the areas of life that we're concerned. But I want every single one of you to bear in mind, whatever your sign, that this full moon is related to the new moon of the 12th of January. And that period following the new moon, which was another 14 days, just as much as this full moon, will have a 14-day period to reveal aspects of itself. And it's important to recognize that, because, the full moon goes past and you think, oh, well, that was great. I had a really great time, went to a great party, only to be clobbered, like 4 days later, when something comes to your attention that you think, oh, wow. But the idea of the new moon at the beginning of the year is very much tied up with the idea of the affirmations we make and the hopes that we have for the year ahead, and the determination to materialize those hopes. So halfway through, full moon in Capricorn, how far have we come? Is something over, done and dusted, been there, done that, got the t-shirt? Or is it now ready to be moved to the next level? Now, these are things all of us should consider at this full moon, regardless of what sign of the zodiac we are. But obviously, this full moon for Capricorn is very important. It's the only full moon this year in your sign. And it's very empowering, this full moon, because the moon, the emotions, are also harnessed to the sun, which is the solar force, the outer world, the outer trappings, the physical world. So inner and outer really manifest with the moon in your sign. So we could call it a full moon of manifestation. You can manifest things at this time, often things that are very personal, things that you care about personally, not necessarily to do with finance or to do with work or whatever, although they might come into it. But it's the personal connection to the things that are going on that are important. And of course, because the sun is in your opposite sign, it's in the area of relationships, then it may be that a lot of relationship matters are to the fore around the time of this full moon. Is it that you're feeling that kind of emotional tug towards someone, and you really, really want to make that relationship something special? You want to, bring it out into the world at large, so everyone can see you're a couple. You want to marry? Do you want to form a partnership in business? Do you want to join an organization and sign a contract? Sign up to that organization. Or is it the reverse? Is it, we've done this journey. Our journey is complete and it's time to move on. So we've got those kind of things, and especially with Pluto involved, then I think if you've been hanging on to a relationship and, it's been incredibly difficult, and it might reach breaking point around the time of this full moon. Now, if we come to the opposite side, we think about Cancer. Well, of course, the sun is in Cancer right now. It's birthday time for you Cancerians. And Pluto, the moon and Pluto will be in the 7th house of relationships. So this has a lot to do with the impact other people have on your life. What's going on in their lives that impacts yours. So maybe anything from, having a particular arrangement that is all set up, but something happens to another person and they can't make it, and so that throws your plans out. It may also be in a similar way to Capricorn, that you're ready to really nail your colors to the mast with an organization or with a person, or with your own company, you know, what else you might want to do. So it becomes something that's complete and you're naming it. Same too with Capricorn and Cancer, that if something has done its day, you're going to know about it at this time. And remember what I was saying about confronting things. Let's confront the truth. Let's confront the reality of what we have, folks, and, you know, make adjustments accordingly. It is important, I think, Cancer, and you are a very caring sign, and you know, you are one of the most caring signs of the zodiac, and you're a good listener. But you need to be even more prepared to listen to other people around the time of this full moon, because it's other people's needs and feelings, their desires, their wants, their expectations. And you need to listen to those and see how you can fit in with theirs. So it's a little bit different. So if we come to Aries, then the full moon itself is in the 10th house. And so we're there in the area of career and life direction, our place in the world. It's where we step out from our kind of personal world and we deal with things out there. And of course, it can relate to things to do with your career, if you have one, but a lot of people don't have a career, they don't want one, but they've still got an outer life, an out in the world life. And that might have quite a lot to do with your social status. It might have a lot to do with things that you're involved with, where a lot of other people are involved, or you're right out in society. Somehow that's taken you out there. So we got a full moon. So we got this, you know, the sun is at the base of your chart, the moon at the top of your chart. And so we have this feeling that there's also a little bit of a tug of war going on here. Is it Aries that you feel that, you know, in order to give the things that matter to you in your worldly role, in your material world, in order to get them right, to get them attended to pay attention to them, to your career, the efforts you may be putting in to get a job, to make your job work, to make a name for yourself, is it at the cost of your private life? Is a home life suffering? Are you not home enough for the kids? You know, does the home itself need attention? You know, are there problems that you've got that you need to fix? So there is this sense that there's a bit of a tug of war going on between these two areas of life. And somehow you have to find the balance between these two areas. And of course, aligned with Pluto as well, there will be some pretty big things happening to you. And, you know, to manage them successfully is going to take a lot of introspection and consideration, you know, not doing your Aries thing. And, you know, I'm an Aries, so I speak from truth here. You know, we do have a tendency to try to do things very quickly. You know, we don't want them to hang around, but I don't think that's a good plan on anything that happens in this second half of July, around this full moon time. Let it simmer, let the dust settle, then think very carefully about your actions. If we come to Libra, of course, you're the opposite sign, and the moon for you is in the 4th house and the sun is in the 10th house. So we're already in a period for you where there's a lot of activity going on about building your reputation, about creating a material world that's stronger for you and better for you, and material concerns, you know, things to do with bills, things to do with finance. This is all flowing into your material world. And of course, most of us earn our money in a job. So that's why jobs for Librans are really important at this point, and why there may be a lot of things going on in your career world that are reshaping it, especially if you have a sort of birthday around the 17th of October, because that's going to pick up the Pluto transit, and of course tie into this full moon. And whereas I was saying with Aries are the Speedy Gonzales of the zodiac and like to do everything very quickly, Librans are the reverse. I mean, you like to take your time. You really want to consider all the angles. We want to know if this action will upset that person, or what will that cut out if you do this. So you go on agonizing forever about a certain decision. And so what I would recommend to you, Libra, is face the reality. If you just stick that on your fridge and remind yourself every time you go to the fridge, face reality. That's good. That's confrontation, because it means you're looking at the truth of it. And that means you are empowered by the fact that you're looking at something in reality and therefore intending to deal with it. But yes, for you, we might be looking at a lot of things going on home territory. Maybe there's a lot of change within the family itself, or maybe there's a lot of tension with family members. And, you know, push comes to shove a lot with a Pluto full moon set up like this. So there might be some quite difficult moments to do with family, but it may also be telling you that you need a new home. This ain't working for you anymore. You could make changes on your own home to accommodate things, of course, but it may be better to think about moving on. And that full moon is going to probably bring all these kind of issues right up to the surface. Now, if we move on to Scorpio, then we've got the full moon on the 3rd and 9th axis, as I say. So the moon itself is in your 3rd house, the sun is in the 9th house. And these two areas are about communication and travel, period. Now, you don't need me to tell you what's going on in the world of travel. I got caught up in it. Endless queues at security. We had to wait a long time for baggage at airports. We've now got problems with strikes going on in the UK, so we can't get trains. So there's all sorts of things related to travel and communications generally, not even associated with Scorpio, just generally. So put a full moon on here, this axis, it becomes a lot more personal. So maybe your travel plans are going to have to change. Maybe a journey you're taking around this full moon period is going to be a long day's journey into night. It's going to be really, really trying. It's going to take a long time. It's going to demand a lot of kind of philosophical thought to deal with it. But of course, we can make journeys in the mind. We can make journeys in experience, journeys of the heart. So journeys are something else you need to think about on this full moon. Where have you been on a journey, and where has it taken you? This relationship, this journey in emotions and everything else you've been on, where are you? Where have you arrived? And in some cases, for some Scorpios, it's going to be a sense of peace and rest. We're there. It's great. Done it. And for others, it's like, I can't go through this again. I'm done. This journey is over for me. So we get that always, that pattern with a full moon. And I think certainly on full moon day, you want to avoid really difficult situations. If you've got a big meeting and it's already going to be really, really difficult, you might want to postpone it, get it away from the full moon, because emotions are going to be all over the place with everybody at full moon. And so it's not going to be so easy to be rational about things. But if you can do nothing, you are stuck with some kind of important meeting on the full moon, then just the awareness that things might get out of hand quite quickly, and people will be making ultimatums and, making irrevocable decisions. You don't have to be one of them. You can be the wise person saying, just a minute, let's cool down. Let's kind of figure out what we want to do here. And I think, too, this full moon for you is about the getting of wisdom, and that, we can acquire skills, we can acquire knowledge, because we're studying for something. We want extra qualifications. We want to get an exam that will allow us to go to university, or, whatever it may be. We're studying, we're taking exams, we're getting there. But I think really, even if you're not sitting down studying or doing something to pass an exam, the things that you're experiencing, the things that you're looking at online or wanting to find out more about, these could be terrifically important to your future. So if we swing over to the other side and we look to Taurus, we've got the absolute reverse. You know, we've got the moon in the ninth house and the sun, you know, in the third house. And so when we've got this, you know, this third ninth axis going, we've got a similar travel and communications dynamic going. And I think especially at the time of the full moon, if you know you're traveling, you know, you've got to go to the airport, you've got to go to the port, you've got to make a big journey by train or car, leave lots and lots of time for that. Make sure you've got everything planned out. Make sure that you've got, you know, backup just in case, you know, that there's a diversion, you know, and you need to make other plans. And that is always good, because once you've done it, you've got it under your belt. And then if the journey itself on the full moon, the day after the full moon, around there, even if you do not encounter anything, it goes as smooth as silk, it's still really useful to have those backup plans, you know, in your armory, so to speak. I think too, there's a test of something else, some description for you. And what I would say about this is that it's going to test you to your limits. Now, this might just be an experience that you meet up with, or maybe you're listening to me and you're thinking about this period of the year and you're thinking, oh, I know exactly what that is. I've got this and this and this going on, and I totally relate to the idea that it's a test. But I think if you've not thought about it that way, and we think about this period of the full moon and the Sun opposition Pluto, Mercury opposition Pluto, and we think about all of this, then we probably need to think about recognizing it's a test of our mettle. And if we think about it being a test of our mettle, we can, you know, raise the bar and we can meet it and, you know, reveal our true colors and our capacity to succeed. So I think it's slightly different, you know, Scorpio, Taurus, Taurus, Scorpio. We're looking at the same axis, you know, third ninth, in a subtly different way. So if we look at Leo, then what we've got at the moment is, I referred to at the beginning of this video, the sun is moving through your 12th house, and it's going to emerge out of the 12th house on the 22nd of July, so not long to go. But of course, this full moon takes place while the sun is in the 12th house, the moon is in the 6th house. So you're going to tend to be a little less robust than you usually are. Now, you know, you're a strong sign. Leo is the sign of the heart, and so you are strong in your mind, and you can be very strong physically as well, and strong emotionally. You've got a lot of power. Leo is a powerful sign. So I think when your power is down, it's a bit like, you know, when you're running out of power on your computer, the screen is no longer bright and things are taking much longer to do. So it's like that's where you're at, you know, that you've not got full power. And it's important, therefore, to not do too much, not to push yourself too far, and to also realize that if you don't you're not quite sure what's going on, you don't know what people mean, you don't know why this is happening. Remember, there's a Venus-Neptune square as well, which is all about, what was that? You know, you don't understand that. So the best thing to do is to let the situation settle, wait until you can see what's going on, and then make your response. I mean, that period of the sun in the 12th house is all about restoration. It's about, you know, recharging your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual batteries in preparation for the sun's arrival in your sign when you're full on. You know, it's birthday time, lots of things going on. So it is important to prepare inwardly and outwardly. And so we've got the sun in the 12th house, the moon in the 6th house. And of course, we think about health in the 6th house, which is why I've been talking about overdoing it and overstressing yourself. Don't allow that to happen. And I also think what might be a good point about this particular full moon and its proximity to Pluto is confronting your fears about your health. If you've got a worry, this is the time to sort it. Don't let that worry just nag away your unconscious mind. Deal with it. Now, if we look in reverse and we think about Aquarius, well, the sun at the moment is going through the 6th house of your horoscope, and the moon is in the 12th house. So the 6th house is the area where there's a lot of work going on anyway. And I always say about the 6th house, we do the work of life in the 6th house, because that's what happens day after day. We get up, we have breakfast, we do this, we do that, the other. The actual clock of the day, so to speak, has things that we do at different times, and it gives us our rhythm of life. Well, see, what else we use rhythm for? Well, you don't need me to tell you, but your own bodily rhythm is a good thing to be ticking over very, very nicely. So what we have happened when we got a full moon there is to realize what systems aren't working. What isn't working in your daily life? What isn't working out? What's wrong with you too? Why are things not what they should be? It's a great time to get a health checkup, a dental checkup, and a little bit like Leo as well. What you want to do is really look at what's bothering you. How are you putting up with this injury without going to see a physiotherapist? Is there something that's causing you discomfort? Why are you putting up with it? This full moon is saying, deal with it, confront it. Remember that good word, confronted, is what it's meant to be. And yes, when I talk about the work of life and sort of work per se, Aquarius, we're also looking at, things to do with the workplace itself. So there could be, things happening on the workplace that are stressing everybody else out. It's all extremely kind of, nails on the blackboard kind of thing. But it might be a good idea also to get new systems going. And, if you're very unhappy with your working conditions, then I'm pretty sure that this full moon and the aspects to Pluto, which follow in that second half of July, it's probably time to say, I don't need this. That's another thing to consider, Aquarius. So here we come to Pisces. And when we're looking at Pisces, we're looking at the full moon in the 11th house. Now, this is such a misunderstood area. There's so many areas: the 6th house, the 11th house, the 8th house, the 12th house, and to a certain extent, the 3rd house. I think these people aren't altogether sure quite, why we attach these meanings to these places. And so, I remember when I came into astrology and I was looking at what does the 11th house mean? And it was like hopes and ideals. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's a bit difficult to deal with. Does this full moon have anything to do with your hopes and your ideals? Well, yeah, it may do. But I think a lot about this 11th house has to do with its relationship with the house before, which is the 10th house of career and life direction. So in the 10th house, there's a lot of effort put out to earn a living, to be somebody, In the 11th house, it's sort of like, well, what does that mean? Well, I can be somebody, but am I happy with that? Is that really adding to my quality of life? And is it meaningful? Is this what I've arrived here on earth to do? Is that all there is? And of course, it does kind of boost your humanitarian spirit, Pisces. I mean, you're going to feel things for your fellow human being a lot more on this full moon, and you might be motivated to do more. It might urge you to join an organization that helps people who are in trouble or who, need some kind of charity. That might inspire you to do that. But of course, this area is about collaboration as well. And I think a full moon does put a certain amount of pressure on anything you're working at with other people. So collaborative events, collaborative business ventures, teamwork of any sort is going to root out who isn't pulling their weight. And it's also going to accentuate, what's not working in this mix. What is it that's not making this team work together as a unit? And that might be a very, very important thing to emerge from this particular full moon. Again, Virgo, opposite sign, you've got a flavor of this as well, because here we have the moon really in the fifth house. So we're talking about things that you demand your kind of full heart, if you like. This area of the chart has a lot to do with the heart, both in the sense of romance and also things that bring joy to your heart, and also things that make your heart work better, which are things like sport and activity. That's why the fifth house is the area of the heart, if you like. So, this particular setup is all about, finding that sense of fulfillment with what you're engaged in, whether that has anything whatsoever to do with activities that make your heart work better, or it has to do with a romance. But of course, this is the axis of gestation as well. And often a full moon on the 5th, 11th axis is all about the end of a gestation period. So we can look at that literally and think, is a baby about to be born? Because that's where we get the idea, most of all, don't we? 9 months of gestation and then a baby at the end of it. Well, maybe that's so. But there are all sorts of things that can gestate or be in gestation. And what happens on this full moon is they're ready for delivery, or shortly thereafter. They don't have to be on the day, but shortly thereafter. And I think with Pluto involved, we're really talking about a hard labor. We're talking about, really working at it, giving it your absolute all. And if we look at romance in this as well, a kind of crossroads point for a romance. Is it 3 months into this romance? And there's that change that goes on. It's a little bit like a lot of other things that happen in our bodies that have a blood-brain change or whatever. With a romance, after 3 months, there's a real shift. The projection that goes on when we fall in love with someone or we're in lust with someone, that projection and all the kind of sort of the associated feelings with it start to dissipate, and what's left is the reality of that person. So we're confronting the reality of a romance. Now, sometimes that happens, and even if it is a bit of a bumpy ride, you realize you still love being in this romance, and it's got legs, and you want to get to know this person even more. Or it can be, I just can't, now these feelings have gone, or maybe it's the other person whose feelings have gone. You feel the same, but they don't. Then there's not a lot you can do about that situation if that occurs at a 3-month period. And it's very well worth remembering just as a general rule of thumb. Now, if we come to Gemini, now the moon itself is in the 8th house, and the sun, of course, is in the 2nd house, because after your birth date, the sun moves into the 2nd house, which is why things like money and your assets and the things to do with the stability and the security you have in life are really issues already. So you put a full moon in there, sun in that house, the moon in the 8th house, and things really reach a critical point. So for some Geminis, we're looking at things like having a financial reckoning. We're looking at things to do with, how is the balance of my accounts? Are they good? Are they in good shape? Or have I got a bit of a crisis, a cash flow crisis on my hands? And it may also be your financial relationships, the moon in that area. This has to do with banks and lending institutions, credit card companies, to do with partners in business or partners in life. You have to share the financial factors of your life. And so this full moon puts a bit of stress on that. Yeah, it might be an appropriate time to sign a deal and to get things sorted, contracts on the table, and decisions and understandings made about finance, so you know where you are. But often you do feel poles apart and under pressure when you're dealing with financial institutions and people with whom you share finances. So this is going to be, a period of about a week to 2 weeks where there will be a story, a narrative going on in regard to this. And if we think about where the sun is moving slowly through that second house area. It will shortly head out and move into the third house. But this has already been a time when all sorts of things to do with finance and your security and your stability has really been under the microscope. And this full moon is like the icing on the cake. And this is where you get it done and dusted. So final sign, here we come to Sagittarius. So we've got the reverse here, of course. We've got the sun making its way through the 8th house of the horoscope and the full moon itself on the 2nd 8th axis. So Sagittarius, I have to think about you as a sign. And Sagittarius, enormously positive sign. You are very philosophical about things. And if something isn't working or something needs to be fixed, you go at it. It's like the adventure of life. A challenge is an adventure to you. So you have a very good attitude to things, when you've got a problem in front of you, but you're not particularly good with stress. That's the problem. And you don't deal with it very well. And so you've got to remember that around this full moon time, you're going to feel a little stressed out. So what do you do to avoid being stressed out? Well, you don't overpack your schedule. A bit like having the 12th and 6th houses affected. You need to take a little bit more rest, and you need to take a deep breath every time something comes up, especially if it's a financial matter. Breathe deeply. Then remember, it's money. This is a situation that requires common sense and practical steps. It doesn't require a lot of emotion. And I think if you can just say that to yourself, you can probably come through this full moon period feeling, you know what? I got this sorted. Remember the word confrontation again with this full moon. Maybe finances have needed an overhaul for quite a while, and now they're going to get one, and you're going to feel better because of it. But the other thing is that, of course, this is where you earn money, the 2nd house. So it may be that there are problems with your income. Maybe people aren't paying you on time, or maybe you've got something else happening. Maybe there's a reduction in your income, or maybe what you're not expecting is a big item of expenditure. And so now you're going to have to rob Peter to pay Paul, or really try to figure out how you're going to pay for this expenditure. But yes, it's not without its benefits, this full moon. It is about closure and completion. And you can do deals, sign on the dotted line, get things done and dusted, may even involve settlements and inheritances. And that's a good job done. So that's all 12 signs. And I think the interesting thing is, just in general, when we look at this full moon and we can see its proximity to Pluto, we know that everybody's going to be a bit strung out at this time. And just the understanding that that's why that person isn't being very nice to be with. They're feeling strung out just as you are. And although we can use that full moon for illumination and reflection and all those other things which help us to, really be wise in our lives, wise with our decision making, we're going to still be a little bit stressy. So my conclusion. So I wanted to come to this idea of combining the idea of what you need to do with Pluto, which is confrontation, and also the idea of that full, that full sense of emotions being involved in it. And I'm thinking that, when we confront our fears, we're made stronger. And we all have fears. Believe you me, everybody has fears. Now, the thing that I'm sort of talking about here, especially with Pluto, are kind of fears that we don't want to talk about. I mean, if you've got a big day coming up, of course you're going to have fears. That's natural. But we're talking about fears that have built up as a result of our experience of life, the things that we feel we don't do very well, the things that we're frightened about dealing with, the things that we don't want to name and shame, particularly about ourselves. Now, it's very, very important that we do look at that, because when we really look at, I use this as an analogy a lot, the idea of when we were little, and we didn't know what was under the bed. And we took a little look, and then it all looked terrifying. There was a funny shape under the bed. And we had to ask our parents, what's under the bed? Can you get it out? And it was just an old shirt or something. So we needed some help in order to shed light on what we were frightened about. Well, now we're an adult. We don't have a parent. We're our own parent. We have to figure out that we need to confront things, but it will make us stronger. And in fact, when I was talking to Gemini and Sagittarius in the full moon section, I was talking about, confronting finances, because that's something a lot of us are quite frightened about. We don't open bank statements, or we don't want to, look at what we've got in the bank when we go to an ATM. These are kind of common failings, but you know what? Look at how much you've got in the bank. Open the bank statements. Once you can see where you're at, you can begin to take action. It makes you stronger. It sorts it out. And there are other things, really, that we feel about ourselves. We're unsure about aspects of ourselves that we think are inferior. I suppose that sounds a little bit more like Saturn. But with Pluto, things are so deeply buried. They're things about our childhood. They're things that happened to us in childhood. They're things that have left a lot of emotional scars. Well, we can't just keep avoiding them. We really do have to talk about them. It's good for our mental health. We do have to look at why we're still finding it difficult to deal with them. But this whole idea, whatever it is, as you're listening to me and something comes to mind and you think, oh yeah, that's, I know what that is. If we remember that confronting our fears makes us stronger, that's all we have to know. So last thing before I go, and that is those of you who are already my audio subscribers may already know that I've done a really in-depth look at the next 6 months ahead on audio. It's about 20 minutes long on audio, and you'll already have had notification about that, and hopefully you're listening to it. But those of you who perhaps don't visit my website, or you don't know about my audio program, this might be something that you might like to get involved with, because, to have a kind of personal, in-depth, sign-by-sign look at what happens in these next 6 months might prove to be a really important guide. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.